Okay, welcome everybody to, I think it's number 9 of the no possibilities, no problemo, only possibilities. And today, what I had set up to talk about was being a steward of the earth. And it's really interesting because this can be a very controversial topic. And we'll be looking at it from a different point of view. And we'll be looking at it from an access consciousness point of view, which is interesting because access consciousness, we don't actually have a point of view. What we have is a set of tools and processes that when you use them, you can get to know what is really true for you. And what actually happens is in this reality, everything is sold to us, and often there is either a lie that's attached to it or that it's true for you in that 10 seconds, and then 10 years later it has changed, but we still function as if it's real and true. And so I don't know if you guys read it, but I put a post up on Facebook the other day about being a steward of the earth, and it was a little bit controversial, and because I used to be an eco warrior. That's what I used to term myself as. And so I had very, very entrenched points of view about deforestation, about I was very pro Greenpeace and anything to do with any clubs or people that were committed to doing that sort of thing. I was anti-sugar. Because it creates, according from this reality's point of view, it creates a lot of problems with the body and all of that sort of thing. Anti-fluoride, I used to go to anti-fluoride in the water. I used to go to the meetings and I used to be very vocal about it and all of that sort of stuff. And I used to piss people off with my points of view because I was one of those, like a born-again Christian type people that just love to shove that Bible as far down your throat as possible. Not particularly a nice energy to be around. And with the access consciousness tools, I'm not here to shove my point of view down your throat. It's more like, here are a set of tools and processes that can give you a different perspective and find out what is actually true for you. Now, since I've been using those tools and processes, it's like my point of view about being a steward of the earth is totally different to being an eco-warrior now. For me, an eco-warrior was being really strong and having a very fixed point of view about things. And I think Gary said in the foundation manual about about whaling. He uses that as an example. And I know that the Japanese have a huge whaling industry. It's one of the few countries that still have that. And Greenpeace do a lot of anti-whaling. They do it from a point of view that it is a great wrongness. They're very forceful with their point of view on that. And all of that sort of stuff. My point of view is, has anybody actually connected in with the whales? And Gary says that for him, it's sort of like connecting with the whales and give them the information and awareness of, if you don't want to die, if you hear this type of engine on a boat, that's a whaling boat, dive deep. Yeah. And so it's a very, very different point of view because it's actually about you communing with the molecules of nature and communing with the planet and being in question with the planet and never coming to conclusion. Because if you take the side of if you take any side, if you take the side of the whalers, or if you take the side of Greenpeace, what you do is you create conflict, and conflict doesn't work. War is another name for conflict. So, does fighting for the rightness of your point of view actually work? No, it doesn't. All it does is create war or conflict. or it will create people that are stupid and align and agree with your point of view, or it will create people that resist and react to your point of view. And what that does is it creates separation. And so having a point of view about something, having a fixed point of view about something, a fixed perspective, always means that you have to go into some sort of conflict with somebody else's point of view, and that is designed to create separation. And what it does is it ultimately it creates separation of you from you. So everywhere where you have been doing separation from you by buying other people's point of view as real and true, can we now destroy and uncreate all of that? Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys and beyonds. And that's the access clearing statement for any people that are new here. Check it out on www.theaccessclearingstatement, registered trademark. Cool. Any questions thus far about interesting points of view? And Marie's here, and Kathleen. Hello, guys. Denise, Sharon. Woohoo! The crew is here. Lorena is in the next room. Yes, Jackie.
I really loved your point of view, Gary's thoughts about communing directly with the whales and communicating with them and telling them. I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How novel this it seems so novel to me.
Totally different way. Nobody has ever talked about it from that point of view before.
Yeah.
And it's
I've got a question about that.
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Is it Kathleen?
I'm looking at whether to stay here in Virginia where I am right now. I'm looking at my next job, and there's a possibility here in Virginia, and there's also I just got a job offer down in North Carolina, and I'm wondering if there's a way you use like the natural, how do you say, like the divas of the area or whatever, to ask them questions about which place would create more for me and create more for them. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
Well, let me just do an advert first, because next week on the 4th, which will be on the 3rd in your country, I've got that Receiving from Nature Spirits exercise. It's only $30, and it will be, and that is if you come along to that will give you some more, because I'll be talking for the first 10 minutes about nature spirits and divas and stuff like that, and about how they can contribute and how you can contribute. And then we'll go into an exercise where we can actually start to commune with the nature spirits and get more awareness around that. So if you want to come along to that, that's great. And because you asked that question, you see, the thing is with access, if somebody is willing to ask a question, they're willing to receive a different possibility. So your question right now is a really great one. And yes, what do you know, Kathleen?
Well, it's funny because I know that there's things that I love about being here, and then I also feel like a little bit of a calling there. There's things that I love about the job offer here, and things I'm not feeling as excited about the job offer down there. So I'm trying to like look at all the different aspects of it instead of just looking at this job versus that job. You know, like what will create more for me overall.
Well, are you looking at what will create for you, or are you looking at all the pros and cons?
It's a little hard to hear you.
Are you looking for what will create for you, or are you looking at all the pros and cons?
I am. I know I am getting a little bit into the pros and cons.
Oh, just a little bit.
Just a little bit, of course.
Yeah.
Well, how would you? I mean, I know that the job here feels lighter to me, but it's like to have the whole picture. How do you kind of throw chaos into it instead of all the definitions of what's right and wrong, you know?
Well, what if you just indulge your choice? Like for a day, choose the job in Virginia, and then for another day, choose the job in South Carolina. Oh, that wasn't a very good South Carolina accent. Um, and see what shows up.
Okay.
Like the whole thing about choice is that when you choose it, you will get the awareness of it. So when we indulge in a choice, it doesn't mean that you have to go and book your tickets now to South Carolina, or but when you choose it, you'll get the sense of what that would be like. And then you can add to it and ask that question, you know, if I choose this, what will my life be like in 5 years? And any time that you are looking at the pros and cons, stop. Because what you're doing is you're looking at it from this realities point of view. And then you just get caught up in what's right and what's wrong. You're trying to choose what's right and avoid what's wrong. And that way you don't really get to have a choice. You don't get to create or design your life. What you're doing is you've bought, somewhere along the line, you've bought the point of view that you have to do the pros and cons thing.
Yeah.
Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. It's like I'm also looking at how not to come from past reference points, because they're offering me a job in special education and I go right into, oh God, the paperwork that's going to be involved, you know. So it's like not using the past reference points, but also being aware, you know.
Yeah. Well, you're using your past reference points to create for the future. You're coming to a conclusion that there will be paperwork, rather than going, using that awareness to your advantage. So in special education, there's a lot of paperwork. Okay, what would it take to get around that paperwork? Yeah, and then what would it take for the paperwork to be fun? You know, these are the sorts of questions that you've got to be willing to ask, so that you, like right now, Lorena, who has been helping me with Xero, which is a bookkeeping, she's in the other room, which is a bookkeeping thing online. And you know, I was in such resistance, and she'll put her hand up for this, that when she first started, I was like, I hate this, you know. And now that I've dropped my barriers and actually gone into question, you know, what contribution is Xero to my business and stuff, I've actually been having fun with it. And I'm actually like, I've been learning how to use Excel spreadsheets more. I've been learning how to do stuff. I've become much more aware of where I'm spending my money in my business, where I'm not willing to receive in my business. And so it's been a huge contribution to me. So what if that was like with the paperwork, is what if you went into question with it rather than coming to a conclusion of paperwork? Yeah. And then it can be fun, or you might find somebody that can do it for you, or they might put a bill through where you don't have to do so much paperwork. You could ask the nature spirits for contribution. You know, like so one of the things that we would look at in the nature spirits call next week is sort of like, paper is made from timber, you know. So whenever you're doing paperwork, it's literally like, wow, there's all of the timber nature spirits, there's all of the wood nature spirits there with you. You know, it's just been transformed into another product, but you can tap into that energy. And it's a bit like, okay, so like Greenpeace is anti-pollution, yeah. So my point of view is totally different. I don't see cigarette smoke as pollution. I don't see, or a wrongness. I don't see, you know, factories that are blowing out all of this carbon monoxide, or cars that are throwing out all of this pollution as pollution per se. It's just sort of like, they're just molecules that are put together in a different way. And so if you can actually tap into the molecules of the pollution and ask it to change, you know, and then you can deal with things in a totally different way. It's the same with fluoride. So my point of view is, I can ask questions of the molecules in fluoride. So if I'm drinking fluoridated water, then I can actually ask the molecules to change, so it's not going to affect my body. And we all have that. So it's like, just for example, your paperwork, how, if you talk to the molecules of the paperwork. Now, when we talk about molecules, it's so interesting because people think that molecules are these solid, dense things. They're not. They're mainly space. And science tells us that they're 99.99999% space. So when we're actually talking to the molecules, we're not actually talking to the solidity of the molecules. We're connecting into the space of those molecules that are creating that piece of paper or creating that piece of smoke or whatever it is, or our bodies, or nature spirits, or the earth. Yeah. And are we separate to the earth, or are we part of the earth? We try to be as separate as possible, yeah, with our points of view. We buy as many points of view as we can possibly fit in this brain to keep us separate from the earth so that we can justify raping it. So everywhere where you have bought all of these points of view or sold these points of view across lifetimes to keep us separate from the earth so we can justify the abuse that we have perpetrated on it across lifetimes, can we now destroy and uncreate all of that? Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys and beyonds. Does that help, Kathleen?
Yeah. It helps me to see where I'm not yet in question. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And like, what's the job in Virginia? Is it a similar sort of job or?
No, it doesn't include as much paperwork, and it's like it's private schools where they're not as uptight about that kind of stuff, and it feels a lot lighter to me. They just haven't told me whether they can provide insurance or not. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at, am I willing to come up with some other way to take care of that if they can't provide that, because that job seems lighter in a lot of ways.
So whatever it is light for you is true for you in that 10 seconds. Yeah. And what if you were willing to be the valuable product? I got offered a job the other day, and it was, and the person said, so how much would you like to get paid for it? And it was like, oh, that's cool. And immediately I went into the least amount. I was like, fuck, I don't value me very much, do I? Holy shit. And then I was laughing and joking with them. And I said, well, how about I do the job for free and I pay you? And how much an hour would you like me to pay you? And they said $200 an hour. And I went, and they were an access person. So they were facilitating me. And it was like, wow, this person really values themselves. They value themselves at $200 an hour. And, I was looking at $25 an hour. That's how much I value me. And how much do you value you? Yeah. So,
well, that's interesting that you say that, because with this particular job in Virginia, there'd be less hours. So it would give me what I would like right now to be able to pay the bills, but then I'd also have more hours to do some of the access stuff and to play with some other possibilities, which, I've kind of complained about with my other teaching jobs, that I'm like working more than 40 hours a week and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, instead of looking at it like, oh, am I going to get enough hours? Be like, okay, well, that'll be enough hours to pay some basic stuff. And now I have all these extra hours to create other things. It's just a different way of looking at it.
What streams could you add to your life?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that, Kathleen, that is great, because, it's like, maybe you're not as fucked up as you think you are, because what that shows is that you have a level of awareness that allows you to look from a totally different perspective about what you value as you in your life. So many of us have devalued ourselves and worked for a dollar wage and give ourselves away to the man. Yeah, we work for the man and we don't have time to create our lives the way that we would like to have them. So, and is that a contribution to the earth? Is that being a steward of the earth? No, because you're working 70 hours a week. You don't get to take your body out into the trees. So this is one thing is, like your body is part of the earth. It's part of being the steward of the earth. And when we cut off our body from the earth, you're cutting you off from a source of inspiration, from the source of energy, from the energy space and consciousness that we truly be. And like all of you guys right now, what part of nature do you love that you are keeping yourself separate from? And I was talking to Shannon O'Hara, who is founder of Talk to the Entities, the other day, and she was saying, like, for her, she has to be around trees. Now, she doesn't have to be around trees 24/7. You don't have to become a hermit and go and live in the forest. That's not what it's about. But if you love to be around trees, you have to start inviting that tree energy into your life. And when you start doing that, like Shannon travels a lot, she'll find venues and places in cities where there will be trees. Yeah. And so the trees will be constantly contributing to you. So for my dad, who's a gardener, he's not interested in herbs or vegetables. He's interested in flowers. And when he's around flowers, he's happy. Yeah. And so for him, it's flowers. So it could be animals. It could be whatever it is for you. And if you're willing to include that part that contributes to your body, then it will contribute to where you're living, to your job, to everything that you're being and doing.
Yeah, when I first got to Virginia, that my job here was crazy bad, so I left. But here I have a place on 11 acres with trees, and then right down the street is the ocean, and that's something I've been asking. Well, it's the bay, but it's like but that's something I've been asking for a long time. So just acknowledging that job got me here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the other thing with being a steward of the earth. Is that you've got to keep acknowledging your power and potency. You've got to acknowledge the choices that you've been making, and you've also got to acknowledge where you've been doing unconsciousness or anti-consciousness. So unconsciousness is when you're buying this reality's point of view as real and true, and anti-consciousness is when something is not real and true for you, but you continue to perpetrate it anyway. Now, it's not a rightness or a wrongness, but if you're willing to acknowledge it, then you can change it. And for me, I've just been willing to start to acknowledge at all the places where I've been doing anti-consciousness. And let's put that into context with regards to being a steward of the earth. It's like when I was, just by writing that article about where I was being an eco-warrior, it was sort of like me acknowledging where I was perpetrating anti-consciousness on the planet. Because I actually knew that there was something greater. Yeah. But I wasn't willing to be that controversial me. I was still following everybody else's point of view. And I knew that, but I wouldn't speak up about that. Or I wouldn't be that energy that would change that. And so when I'm willing to acknowledge that I was still perpetrating that reality, that's anti-consciousness, cool. Now I don't have to do it. Now I have another choice. So, and it's not like I have to get up on my, pedestal, and shout it out. It's not about you. It's not about swinging from one side to the other. It's about the wealth of who you be and tapping into that. And it's you being you. It's you being the wealth of who you be that is so fucking controversial, that will create an energy of that will interrupt people's points of view. And for some people, they will go into resistance and reaction. And those are not the people that you really want to be in your quote unquote inner circle. And those that are the people that see it and perceive it and see that.
I'm sorry. That's the first time when somebody said inner circle when I thought of something sexual instead. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a whole new meaning of inner circle.
Yeah. I don't know where you're going with that, because now I've gone to sex. Oh, God.
Sorry. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
And, that was great.
Well, actually,
what about the contribution your sexual energy can be to the earth?
Yes.
That. We were just going, I was just going to go to that. That was brilliant. Yeah. So it's you are that sexual energy, and that's not bonking. You know, that's not necessarily copulation. I mean, sexualness can include copulation, but it's not only limited to copulation. And it's so that's that sexual energy that you have with the earth, which is about your body being turned on. Yeah. So, and that's where when you start to commune with the elements or the molecules of the planet, and with the nature spirits and stuff, which are very, very sensual, sexual beings in that they're happy, yeah, and they're joyful. Is you start to have that showing up in your body and in your life, and that way you can have so much more ease with your body. And your body is this like barometer. I'm gonna steal that from the net. And like your body is a barometer to how much you are willing to receive. And in order to receive, there's this element of sexualness. So everywhere where you've cut off your sexualness, everywhere where you've misidentified sexualness as copulation, can we now destroy and uncreate all of that, please? Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys, and beyonds. Yeah, where are you using sexuality as a way to create distance or separation between you and other people, you and the planet, you and nature spirits, and everything that is? Can we now destroy and uncreate it all? Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys, and beyonds. Cool. Any other questions before we go? That's been a weird call. I've really enjoyed it. How does it get any better than that? So
yes, hi.
Oh,
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
I have a question about the molecules, because I think that I go into the physics learning and molecules. And what question can I ask? What can I do to be able to perceive, to move the molecules and not to separate from, is this the earth? Is my body? Is this a table? Is this you? I made a separation between the energy and the molecules.
Yeah. So everywhere where you've brought the physical point of view of what a molecule, how a molecule is structured, with a nucleus,
yes,
center, and electrons running around, and there's lots of space between the electrons and the neutron, etc., 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 or the nucleus. Would you now be willing to destroy and uncreate it all?
yes.
Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys. If you start to go into the quantum mechanics of physics, it starts to become more and more about the energy rather than the solidity. And when I'm talking about talking with the molecules or communing with the molecules, it's not just communing with the elements, it's communing with the space, the energy, and the consciousness that is imbued in every single element that's ever been created. And so, you know, like when you go out of the atmosphere and into space, there are no elements. It's devoid of elements, but there is lots of space. So you can still commune with the molecules of the space. Yeah, because the space is what the space around everything actually allows the quote unquote form and structure of that thing to be physically actualized or manifested. So it's like music. There is no molecule of music, but when you actually are willing to be the space around each note, when you then the music can be so much more dynamic. When you try to make it solid and linear, then the music becomes much more static and much more of this reality. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, I would suggest that you watch Amadeus, which is about Mozart and Salieri. And now Salieri and Mozart were two musicians at the same time. Salieri was very much about this reality. And he created the music from this reality of form and structure and linearity. And Mozart created from the chaos and the space. And, you know, Mozart, everybody knows who Mozart is. Not many people have ever heard of Salieri. And that's because Mozart music had this element of space with it, had this element of consciousness and this chaos attached to it, that when you listen to it, it is transformational. Whereas Salieri's music is more linear. It's not wrongness, it's just more linear and will take you into the solidity of this reality. So everything that just brought up or let down, can we now destroy and uncreate it all?
Yes.
Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, ice, short boys and beyonds.
Maybe I make the earth very, very, very solid to be sure that I can stay on it.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, like there is no molecule of gravity. It's an energy, yeah. But you can still commune with the molecules of Earth that create the energy of gravity in the first place. So when I'm talking about communing with molecules, it's including everything: the energy, the space, and the consciousness. Yeah. So everywhere where you're unwilling to float off the planet, would you now be willing to destroy and uncreate all of that?
Yes.
With their right, wrong, pop, popcorn, ice, short boys and beyonds. And everywhere where you're using your points of, or everywhere where you're buying everybody else's points of view about stewardship of the earth and making them solid, real and true, that aren't real and true, can we now destroy and uncreate all of that?
Yes.
Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys and beyonds. Like, you have a look at Greenpeace. Is a really good example. They do a lot of stuff from fight. Yeah? And like, is that a light energy or is it a heavy energy?
Heavy.
It's heavy, yeah. Am I saying that they're doing something wrong? No. Like, cool. Without them, they, you know, like they're bringing up awareness. So, but are they doing it from consciousness or are they doing it to sell their point of view of they're wrong and we're right? Now, not everybody in Greenpeace is going to be from that point of view. But if you look at, there's a lot of stuff lately on abuse of animals. And it's, you know, like putting sheep in ships from Australia and sending them to Saudi Arabia, and they're on the ship for 6 weeks and they're in this little cage and they're fed pellets of food that are basically just fillers. They don't actually have much nutritional value, so that they don't feel hungry and they're fattened up by the time that they get there and all of this weird-ass shit. And it's sort of like we can either go into the rightness or wrongness of that, or ask, okay, or tap into the energy space and consciousness. What can I contribute here? What can change here? Can I change anything? Because sometimes you can't change anything yet. So everything that just brought up or let down, can we now destroy and uncreate it all?
Yes.
Good and bad, right, wrong, pop, popcorn, iron, short boys and beyonds. Cool. Okay, I've got to go to the airport now and pick up a nature spirit. Literally.
Thanks so much, Liam. So valuable.
Yeah. And thank you all guys for contributing. You know, like this has been really, really fun for me. How does it get any better than that? And if it's been fun for you, pass it on.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Liam. Bye.